Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel, Brianna's Bachelor Breakdown. Today we're going to be discussing episode 6 of Katie's season. Let's get started. So we opened the show with a bit of girl talk between Tayshia, Katie, and Caitlyn. They decided to challenge the guys to go a week without engaging in the friendly handshake with themselves. It's fun, it's lighthearted, and it's very much so in line with Katie's pro-sex persona. The guys, when they're told of this situation, are very visibly thrown off when it's announced. I personally would like to see more challenges and friendly competitions from the leads. I think it's fun. I think it adds a bit of comedic relief into the mix for the shows like this where it's always about catching the most dramatic moment. You know, this brings us back to a more lighthearted scenario. Justin gets the first one-on-one of the week, which honestly, I did not see coming. I have literally never seen them exchange words, and when I heard his voice on the date, I realized I had also, as a viewer, never heard him speak words. So overall, just a lot of firsts going on, but the date was a wedding vow ceremony and a photo shoot, which in recent seasons has become a bit of a staple. I think it's interesting to see which leads do this as a group date scenario or do it individually. I do remember that Matt did it as a group date, but Tayshia only did it with Zach. And I wonder if doing it with one person is supposed to be a sign, since obviously Tayshia ended up with Zach. If that's the case, throwing Justin into the mix would really throw off my final four predictions of Michael A., Andrew, Blake now, instead of Connor, and Greg. And if Justin manages to make it out of the woodworks, I think he could really come for Michael A's spot, because I know Katie, the only thing I feel like that would hold her back from going with Michael is that she's hesitant about stepping into motherhood, which she said in the premiere of the season. Meanwhile, back at the house, Hunter is using absolutely no evidence to calculate his own final four predictions, with of course putting himself in the running. This obviously rubs the guys the wrong way, and they get back to work on their anti-Hunter campaign. They don't like that he's calculated and seemingly knows too much about how the show works. One thing that was interesting to me is that knowing too much about the show is cast in a negative light here, but I don't think the same would be said if we were on The Bachelor and it was a girl who was saying all this, right? Since the show's fan base is primarily women, I think it's more expected and accepted that women would already be viewers before coming on, and it'd honestly be probably kind of weird if they didn't have some idea of how things worked. But then for a guy, he's supposed to have just magically stumbled into a casting application while being prepared to say that he was attracted to the lead beforehand, while also apparently not being too into the show. I don't know. For me, it's just not the insult that I think they think it is. Later on, we head into the evening portion of Justin's date. Katie's stylist really tried it again, y'all, with this oversized, sparkly blazer. At this point, I feel like whoever this is just having fun, because not only was it not a look, we've seen an oversized blazer from Catherine approximately every episode so far. I'm gonna need some variety. I also didn't really like the hair. I'm not a huge fan of a pulled back look when there's either no part or it's not slicked down. I just don't like the random bridal-esque like puffiness that she had going on. Katie opens up to Justin about her dad and learning about the man who raised her was not her biological father, as well as the fact that her actual biological father has been trying to forge a relationship with her recently. I'm glad that she felt comfortable enough opening up about this to Justin. I felt like Justin was really actively listening and taking in what she said, but I felt like he didn't really actively provide a direct response. He said things like, oh, thank you for sharing. You're so strong. I want to be here for you. This, and the third. But I would have liked to see some back and forth, maybe some, oh, how do you feel about that? How do you think that all this has, impacted you and shaped who you are today? Just taking it like one step further is what I would have hoped to see out of him. Because I feel like in a relationship, of course, you want your partner to do those things to show you that they're supporting you and that they're open to listening to whatever's going on. But if they don't meet you there in that conversation, the things can begin to feel one-sided. And then those types of conversations will not really be serving their purpose of bringing you two closer together. The next day, we have a group date with 2 drag queens that are ready to spill the tea and get the guys to rip into each other in a roast. Gregory over here would get up and perform a poem, so no surprise there. Hunter over there starts lying through his teeth for no reason. When I was watching it, I felt like that Cardi B clip when she's like, what was the reason?
I had a reason.
What was the reason?
I had a reason.
What was the reason?
I had a reason.
What was the reason?
Because it's very unclear if Hunter knows how cameras and recordings work. Like, this man literally told the drag queen in no uncertain terms that he was not yet in love with Katie, and that saying it before he's ready would cheapen what they're building. And then he proceeds to get himself up and say the complete opposite on stage. So it was just confusing, and none of it was adding up to me. I'm not sure what he hoped to gain from that, especially since at any time the producers could pull up a clip and disprove him. I think honestly one day instead of a roast, the producers should just compile clips of the guys saying stuff in their confessionals next to what they say to the lead or in front of each other, and let them pretty much roast themselves and expose themselves. The rest of the guys really lay into Hunter, and I feel like Katie, she always ignores the initial red flags in the first round of lobbying to get a guy out. And she doesn't really pay attention until it's all shoved into her face at once, because sis was really unmoved. Her mind was not changed after this roast, and she was still willing to give him a chance, which was quite confusing and unclear. After that, we get into the after party, and we see Greg and Katie chatting. And I don't know if it's just me, but I'm starting to get the sense and the vibe that Katie always has to walk Greg through his feelings. Like, he always comes to her and he's like, I'm so anxious and I'm so scared and da-da-da-da. Which, don't get me wrong, I understand that. I'm sure that I would be feeling the same way if I were a contestant, and I'm sure I would want to express those things to the lead so that they know where my head is at. I feel like in doing that, Katie always has to be like, okay, well, what do you need? How can I reassure you? And I feel like as a result, Greg uses his time that could be spent learning more about Katie and each other. He uses that time spent discussing his fears. And to me, it's just not the most productive, especially when you do it repeatedly during your one-on-one time. After that, Blake and Katie have a cringy conversation about the whoa or whatever, however it's pronounced. I'm sure they enjoyed it, but I, as a viewer, would have very much liked to been left out of that conversation. Next, James is leading the charge on the anti-Hunter campaign with Trey and Aaron not too far behind. In Hunter's time given to defend himself, words came out of his mouth, but he didn't really say anything. And then we got the pleasure of hearing Katie vomit. So that was something else that I, for one, did not sign up for. The next day, Connor has his one-on-one. He's so excited, but Katie is coming into it with almost an ultimatum type vibe in her head that he really has to incorporate a spark into their kisses or he's going to be cut. I was honestly surprised that she didn't feel a spark with him, given the way that these two look like high school students in the middle of the hallway who aren't going to see each other until the next period whenever they kiss. So I would be interested to know what it looks like when she kisses someone that she apparently actually likes. Anyways, they meet up with Caitlyn and Jason. I love how for Jason's description, they put it as Caitlin's fiance instead of a former contestant on Becca's season. Like, I love that his status in connection took precedence over how Bachelor Nation originally met him. But they were cute together, and I love watching them creep on Katie and Connor's kiss from afar. They were peering around the couch and the wall and everything, because that would definitely be me in that scenario. So then we leave the day portion to presumably get ready for dinner, but the producers are so wrong for letting Connor get all the way dressed. Like, sis really could have broken up with him literally 30 minutes before that. Like, literally any time before this man put on a whole suit and did his hair and unbuttoned his little half button down. Any time before that, she really could have come and broken up with him. I felt like that was very unnecessary. It was very bittersweet because it was obviously very sad to see him go. But the way that he comforted her throughout the breakup was so precious. You know, him being like, you know, it's okay. And hugging her and being like, you know, it's worth it to have met you. Like, just obviously all around a stand-up guy. And then watching all the guys absolutely lose it. It was very heartwarming as well. And that's something else that I would love to see more of in future seasons. I've actually never seen like a goodbye between the guys. Like, you never see the person who gets eliminated on a one-on-one coming back to the house afterwards to tell everyone goodbye. So that is something that I would love to see more of. However, in the back of my head, I do wonder if Blake hadn't shown up, whether or not Connor would have gotten the boot. Because I honestly, up until this episode, I had him in my final four from the first night. But in any case, Mr. Blake really said, just because Connor had a bad night doesn't mean I'm going to. And he shows up with an 80s style movie boombox outside of her window. Katie is always so surprised to see anyone at her door that lives on this set. Like, he showed up and she was like, that is the last person I expected to see. Like, sis, you've only been seeing like 30 people for the past 6 weeks. It's gonna be one of those 30 people. So I'm gonna need you to get this together because these reactions are not making sense. Anyway, we get set up for the cocktail party and Hunter loses more points in my personal book because I hate a white suit jacket, especially when I can see up close the actual cream color of the jacket on top of a white button down. It was giving me very much trying too hard at prom. But that's just me. That's a personal problem. We know by now that Miss Catherine, she loves a dramatic goodbye. And of course, she had to give Hunter the runaround in sending him home. And snitches also got stitches as we said goodbye to James, Trey, and Aaron. I honestly think, and I think they know this as well based on Trey's little goodbye speech, I think they got a little overconfident in their lobbyist positions and they lost sight of the real reason why they were there. Well, that's all I have for this episode. What did you think of Connor's departure? Were you surprised or was it time to see him go? Let me know in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'll see you back here next Wednesday for another episode of Brianna's Bachelor Breakdown.